So, good afternoon, everybody. I can see lots of people are joining us, so just bear with us a few minutes while everybody gets online here. Lots of pings going, so I guess that's new people appearing. So I think we've got about 26 on here at the minute, so I'll see that number rise up. So we just give it another 30 seconds or so. Got quite a lot to cover, so we don't want to start too late, but always best to let everybody start from the beginning. So we've got 32 online. I think there's about 40 odd booked on, so we'll just let it progress. Go. Got about 34 people, so let's just give it another few seconds. So for those that are online, hopefully you think you're joining a co-design approaches for sustainable drainage workshop, and if you're not, now's your time to escape. Although I can guarantee this will be far more exciting than the thing you thought you were attending. So welcome. So I think whilst we still have a few more people joining, I think we will just make a start. So my name's Steve Thompson. I'm going to act as a sort of chair for this, or compare. We will have a few introductory slides, and we'll hear for some really good speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end with a bit of a sum up. So there are about probably up to about 50 people on the call. So we'll have to manage that as we go through. So I have the pleasure of sitting on the Thames Regional Flood and Coastal Committee as an independent member, which means I'm also involved with the Flood Ready London board, so that's part of my connection with this. I'm also head of water management, energy and flood resilience at JBA Consulting, so I will be wearing numerous hats. So I think if we're gonna get going, so let's have the first slide. So I would just like you all, if you're willing to keep your camera on, but please mute yourselves. We will be using a Q&A function today, so I would ask you, as questions come to mind, please do submit those to the Q&A system. You can, of course, put a thumbs up against them. They will then be ranked and appear at the top. So if you've got a really important issue that somebody likes, then it'll make it to the top of the list. So that's some general housekeeping. So if we could have the next slide, please. So we're going to hear from three speakers. The focus of this event is about community co-design overall, and the webinar is hosted jointly by JBA Consulting, Flood Ready London and the National Flood Forum, and is one of a wide range of events that's taking place during the London Climate Action Week this year. Now, the irony is we're probably on the hottest day of the year, yet we are talking about flooding and drainage, which probably may well become an issue should we have a load of heavy thunderstorms after this hot period. So it may not be directly relevant today, but maybe in the coming days it may be extremely relevant. So during the webinar, we will provide an overview of the London surface water landscape, finding out about the challenges of flooding and exploring the vision and ambition of the surface water strategy. We will highlight lessons learned as a result of co-designing solutions with local communities to respond to climate change. We will explore the benefits that co-design can bring, practical guidance on how to implement co-design solutions, and how to overcome challenges in engaging with diverse and underrepresented communities. And we will look at several case studies of how these learnings can be applied to the London surface water flood and sustainable drainage context. We will look at community action and how a flood action groups work, along with lived experiences from the Portobello Flood Action Group directly. And there will be time for questions and a bit of a sum up and discussion at the end. Now, each of the speakers are going to introduce themselves before they start. That's easier than me reading out three profiles of individuals now, because you will have forgotten by the time we get to the last one. So without further ado, I think that's me done. So if we could move on to our first presentation. Evie, over to you. Please introduce yourself and then crack on. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today amidst the heat. I'm Evie Chalice. I'm the Communications and Engagement Lead for Flood Ready London. I'm going to start by setting out why Flood Ready London exists, what the London Surface Water Strategy is trying to achieve, and why empowering people and communities is an important part of that. Before I get into that detail, I'm going to start with showing a short video which helps bring some of that context to life. Before we play the video, I just wanted to flag that it refers to the July 2021 floods, which were deeply distressing for many people. The purpose of showing this is not simply to look back at what happened, but to remind us why this work matters and that surface water flooding, also known as flash flooding, is not just an infrastructure issue, but it affects people's homes, livelihoods, businesses, and communities. Apologies that was a little quiet. I can pop the link to the video in the chat after. If we could pop to the next slide, please. So to recap on that video, in July 2021, London experienced 2 extreme rainfall events. Flooding affected 24 boroughs, more than 2,000 properties, including hospitals, schools, and underground stations. For many people, the impacts were devastating. Residents were trapped, businesses were forced to close, public transport was disrupted, and communities were left dealing with the physical, emotional, and financial impacts long after the floodwater was gone. And that is the human context behind surface water flooding. The risk is also increasing. Climate change means that heavy downpours, like those seen in 2021, are expected to become more frequent and more severe. The London Climate Resilience Review was clear that London is underprepared for the impacts of climate change, and the latest national flood risk data shows that almost 320,000 properties across the capital are at high risk of surface water flooding, and at least 56,000 basements are particularly vulnerable because of their below ground location. The reviews that followed the 2021 floods pointed towards the need for a shared London surface water strategy so that the capital could take a more coordinated and long-term approach to managing the risk. Next slide, please. So London faces a particular set of challenges when it comes to flooding. Much of the city is heavily built up. Roads, pavements, roofs, and other hard surfaces stop rainwater from naturally flowing into the ground. London's clay soils also limit drainage, so during these intense storms, water can run quickly across the surface. At the same time, London has complicated infrastructure networks, dense development, a growing and changing population, and complex governance. One of the most important points is that water does not follow political or administrative boundaries. Rain falling in one borough can quickly affect another, and flooding can move quickly across roads, rail networks, homes, schools, businesses, and hospitals. There is no single organization responsible for managing surface water flood risk. Responsibilities sit across many places, from boroughs to water companies and the Environment Agency to Transport for London, landowners, and communities. So this fragmented landscape makes collaboration essential. It means that local action needs to be connected to a broader London-wide approach. Next slide, please. And that is why Flood Ready London was established. So Flood Ready London's overall goal is to increase London's resilience to flash flooding through collective action that benefits people, places, and the environment. The partnership brings together key organisations with roles in managing flood risk across London. This includes the Environment Agency, London Councils, London Fire Brigade, the Mayor of London, Thames Water, Transport for London, and is supported by the Thames Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. So Flood Ready London does not replace the statutory responsibilities of those organisations. So instead, its role is to help them work better together. If you could pop back a slide, sorry. Thanks. It provides the shared space for partners to align, using evidence consistently, coordinating investments, supporting delivery, and communicating more clearly with Londoners. The partnership approach matters because no single organisation can tackle this challenge alone. Okay, next slide. Thanks. Together, partners developed London's first surface water strategy, which was published in 2025. The strategy provides a shared long-term plan to help London better prepare for, respond to, and recover from surface water flooding. It brings together evidence, practical guidance, and coordinated delivery. And it's also clear that London needs a step change. It estimates that more than 41 million of annual investment is needed over the long term to significantly reduce flood risk. This is not a small or short-term task. It requires sustained investment, strong partnerships, and action at every scale. Next slide, please. The strategy is built around 3 core ambitions. So the first is resilient places, so making homes, workplaces, streets, and public spaces better prepared to manage heavy rainfall. The second is empower people, ensuring residents, communities, and businesses understand flood risk and can contribute to resilience. And the third is coordinated delivery, so helping all stakeholders involved in managing surface water flooding work together more effectively. Next slide, please. So a major part of delivering the strategy is the creation of 10 surface water catchment partnerships across Greater London. So these partnerships are based on how water naturally drains and flows rather than on borough boundaries. This is important because surface water flooding often moves across those administrative lines. And the idea is to work at catchment scale, so bringing together groups like boroughs, infrastructure providers, communities, and local partners to identify shared priorities and deliver practical projects. And these partnerships do not replace work that is already happening locally, they build on it. So many boroughs are already delivering sustainable drainage schemes, and the catchment approach helps scale up and coordinate work across a wider area. So the first partnerships are established with Central London and Lee Valley, with more planned to cover the whole city. And to date, 3.75 million has been committed by Flood Ready London partners to support the programme, and that funding is supporting practical, cost-effective solutions such as rain gardens, permeable paving, and sustainable drainage systems. These schemes are about reducing flood risk, but they can do so much more than that. Good sustainable drainage can improve water quality, support biodiversity, and make local places more pleasant and resilient. And that is where the empowered people ambition of the strategy becomes so important. Next slide, please. So the London Surface Water Strategy places a clear emphasis on empowered people as a cornerstone of resilience. If we only think about surface water flooding as an engineering problem, we miss a major part of the challenge. So infrastructure matters, funding matters, and modelling matters, but people's knowledge, lived experience, and willingness to engage in change in their local area also matter. People need to understand the risk, know what to do, and have a meaningful role in shaping solutions being delivered. That does not mean shifting responsibility for flooding onto individuals or communities, but it does mean recognizing that flood resilience will be stronger when communities are informed, engaged, and involved from the start. So co-designing solutions with communities can lead to better outcomes. It can help make interventions more locally appropriate, build trust, support long-term stewardship, and create wider benefits. Done well, these schemes can do more than reduce flood risk. They can improve local places, create greener spaces, support health and well-being, and make communities more resilient to climate change overall. Next slide, please. This also links directly to one of the strategy's key principles, which is to prioritize those most at risk. So one of the challenges we face is that surface water flooding, understanding of surface water flooding and awareness is still low. The term itself is often not well understood. Only around 1 in 5 people are confident that they understand it, and awareness is lowest among younger people, lower income households, and renters. This matters because risk is not experienced equally. People's ability to prepare, respond, and recover can be affected by many things, including housing, income, age, language, health, and access to information or support. In London, this is particularly important. We have basement homes, dense housing, major transport networks, very built up areas and communities with very different levels of access to support and information. So if we want flood resilience to work, we have to think carefully about who is most exposed, who may face the greatest barriers, and how we reach people in ways that are practical and trusted. And that is why community scale work is essential. The London Surface Water Strategy gives us the London-wide framework. The surface water catchment partnerships give us a way to coordinate across those boundaries, but the success of the work depends on how well it connects to real places and real communities. And that brings us into today's session. So I'll now hand back over so we can explore what good co-design looks like in practice and how we can deliver sustainable drainage in a way that's inclusive, effective, and locally supported. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Evie. Hi, I'm Bridget Brady. I'm a stakeholder engagement consultant at JBA Consulting. So in this section of the webinar, we're going to explore key aspects of collaborative design, and we'll look at examples of co-design in practice. But first of all, we would love to hear from all of you. What does co-design mean to you? We'd like you to add your thoughts to the word cloud. So you should see the option to add your thoughts to the word cloud. If the option doesn't appear, just click on the poll tab in the top of your Teams screen and add your response there. So we'll just have a short time to complete this. So add any thoughts that might come to you and it should start populating. Starting to see some thoughts come through. Thank you so much. And what we'll do after the webinar, we'll collate these and send them out to everyone as well. So sustainability, collaboration, communities is popping up there in the middle. Community listening, engaging early, meaningful engagement, collective ownership, balance of power. This is really great because these are all things that we're going to explore in the next section. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Great. Okay, so we'll move on. So we'll now start to look at what is co-design and why do we use it. Okay, so co-design requires an active collaboration and shared decision making. So it involves people with lived experience, but also professionals and professional experience. It's quite different to consultation, which just asks for opinions. It's a collaborative approach that brings people together who have an interest in a project to explore issues and develop solutions. Communities are really active partners, highlighting local needs, values, and how places are used. It reveals issues and opportunities that professionals may miss, leading to better outcomes. We set priorities together from the start and design things together. Co-design is people-centered, combining real lived experience and local knowledge with technical expertise. It involves residents and stakeholders early in the design, building trust and empowering communities to lead. Participation is diverse and inclusive, so decisions are shared and transparent, and early engagement can reduce opposition in the long run. It's a flexible and adaptable process, so taking place early and throughout a process or a project. The co-design process shapes decisions rather than just reviewing them, and activities might include workshops, mapping exercises, surveys, or site walks. Co-design enables social value by reflecting the real community needs and creating spaces that people really value and use. That builds a long-term ownership. So it's all about designing with a community, not just for them. So before co-design starts, we need to have a real good understanding of what the community is, who the community is, and what happens there. So who is the community? Things we need to think about are who lives there, who works there, who uses the space, are the different needs of the people using that space. So how is the area used? How do people move about? What activities take place there? What are the values and priorities? What do local people really care about? Trust and relationships, what's happened in history, what are their past experiences and what are their perceptions? Are there local issues and experiences that we need to be aware of? For example, flooding. Are there local groups and venues and skills that are particular in that area? And are there any barriers to participation, so access, time and inclusion? So successful co-design includes it is an iterative approach, building, refining and adapting throughout the process to find a mutually agreeable solution. It involves having a clear scope, so establishing boundaries, managing expectations and fostering trust from the outset. This helps to avoid misunderstandings, miscommunications and scope creep. Co-design will have a cost to it, so however, it does avoid costs further down the line by getting it right for the community at the beginning. Knowing the budget helps to plan what is achievable with the resources available. Being transparent builds trust and helps to reduce misunderstandings and ensures everyone is on the same page. Open-mindedness, being receptive to new ideas, perspectives and experiences helps to strengthen relationships and resolve conflicts. Be prepared to change direction. Don't go in with decisions already being made. And also a variety of approaches, working with the community, not for them. As we've mentioned, the kind of workshops, drop-ins, surveys, site visits, creative activities. having creativity, fostering creativity can help to improve design outcomes using maps, drawings, model making, community photography to get people involved. It's really important to meet the community where they are at, understanding their needs, experiences and priorities, and join in with existing community events to build relationships. Responding to the needs of individual groups within the community and to understand the demographics, a local needs assessment is really key. So using co-design for climate resilience, in this section we'll explore national and London-based case studies looking at considerations and co-design approaches in practice. Examples we'll look at include sustainable drainage, flood and coastal risk management and coastal transition accelerator programme projects. So the first project we'll look at is local needs. So as we've mentioned, it's really crucial to understand the community, to understand the demographics and the local needs of that community, and to respond to the needs of the community and individual groups within it in order to find out what's happening or has happened in the community and what's important for them. This helps with co-designing solutions as we can better meet the community where they're at, understand their needs better so that we can tailor engagement to different groups and voices and start to tailor design solutions to the local community who will be affected by them. The Tees Tidelands project was part of the DEFRA-funded Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme based in the northeast of England in the Port Clarence community. Its aim was to increase flood warning sign-ups within the local community. The first step was to carry out a local needs assessment to understand the community in the area using census data and other types of data. So the local needs assessment, so the data was compared for the project area with wider area for comparison. We found out that compared to the comparison areas, the Port Clarence area community had a higher number of children aged 0 to 9. They had less privately owned properties, with a third of households didn't have a vehicle, and the primary school was the main community hub. This information helped to inform the initial stages of our engagement approach, focusing on engagement with the school and local families and opportunities to collaborate with the local social housing group, and the removal of less effective ideas such as petrol station advertising, as there was a low uptake of cars. So the key elements and the key takeaways for sustainable drainage here are to carry out a local needs assessment before starting engagement and to tailor co-design approaches to meet the needs of the local community. Also, thinking about the different voices within the community and how you might engage in different ways. The next case study is about engaging with existing networks, and we're looking at Boundary Brook Park in London. The aim of the project was to reduce flood risk to local shops by converting a car park into a pocket park, landscaped as a sustainable feature and a flood storage area. This slide shows before and after photos. Initially, there was some opposition from a small number of people who used the car park. However, the majority of people did support the change, mainly due to the greening aesthetic enhancement rather than the flood risk benefit. The project connected with the local community through existing groups, and local needs assessments help to identify groups and networks that we can talk to and to connect with. For example, is there a library? Does the library host local groups? And we can connect via these groups. Ultimately, the local councillors supported the scheme and it went ahead, and the council are now working on the next phase to create an additional flood storage area downstream of Boundary Brook Park. And I'll now pass on to Lucy to look at a couple of other case studies.
Thanks, Bridget. As Bridget mentioned, my name is Lucy Formoy. I am the Social Value and Engagement Lead at JBA, and I'll just be taking you through a couple more case studies, and then we'll move on to some opportunities and challenges with co-designing with local communities. So this next project is an example of how we use co-design to empower a local community to respond to climate change, in particular coastal erosion. So the project was delivered for Coastwise, part of the Coastal Transition Accelerator programme. And our work was in Overstrand and Sidestrand villages in North Norfolk, and this involved co-designing a coastal community transition plan, which served as a guide for the local community and wider stakeholders to respond to coastal erosion. Our creative and varied approach to community engagement aims to capture all voices within the local community, including those typically underrepresented in strategic planning. So this included things like going into a local school to capture input from local young people. We even attended a car boot sale and a local summer fair to kind of tap into those existing community events. This collaborative and iterative process helped local people articulate their values, concerns and aspirations, shaping a shared vision for Overstrand and Sidestrand's future. The co-design approach here was very iterative, involved numerous collaborative workshops where we listened, acted and then repeated. And it was this kind of feedback loop which built trust with the local community, showing that we were incorporating their views into each step of the design process. So the other key part for this project was acknowledging lived experience and the loss that communities can face in climate change related events. Navigating these issues required careful facilitation, trauma-informed practice and continual support structures for both the community members and project staff. We found it really powerful having community advocates who could build bridges with other members of the local community. To respond to this issue, also Coastwise partnered with the Norfolk and Waveney charity Mind to set up a project called Sustain. That was a pioneering climate anxiety project providing support to adults and young people in responding to climate change related events, but particularly coastal erosion. So we were able to signpost the local community to this service, ensuring that they were supported throughout the co-design process and ensuring that that loss they experienced was really acknowledged. So the next project is a little bit different and shows how aligning with other community priorities and co-designing at a more strategic level with local planning departments can be really beneficial. So the Baltic Quarter project is a new blue-green corridor on an old brownfield site for Gateshead Council. The process required really close coordination and co-design with the council's highways design team to integrate the green corridor drainage design with highway drainage design. I think this project really shows that when we collaborate and integrate schemes into other local priorities, we can achieve richer and wider benefits, extending beyond sustainable drainage solutions. So this scheme provided opportunities for play, active travel, connection with local heritage and habitat creation. And overall, by aligning with local priorities and working in conjunction with the local planning department, it contributed towards the regeneration of this part of the city. So finally, legacy is a really key part of co-design process and often can be overlooked. It's the community that will be left with the end scheme, and we can create more sustainable and lasting project outcomes if we involve the community in maintenance and ownership of these projects. At Overstrand, we formed a community action group to take forward the coastal transition plan, and many members of the community came forward to help be custodians and to take action going forward. They had a formalised action plan with key action owners, and they were set up in a similar way to a flood action group, so operating as an independent community interest company whilst having a link to the parish council through a terms of reference. So there may be businesses, schools, community groups or individuals that can help you take forward the continued maintenance and legacy of your projects. It doesn't all need to fall down to the hands of the local authority. To involve communities in post-delivery governance, you must ensure that roles and responsibilities are defined early on. You could look for partnerships with established local charities or VCSEs, and really ensure that the community is involved in the decision making from the beginning on how the site is going to be managed going forward. So just to kind of summarise the experience of the lessons learned from all the case studies that we've shown today, co-design can clearly have a role to play in sustainable drainage. Co-design can help us develop more resilient and sustainable solutions, incorporating local knowledge about what actually happens on the ground and ensuring that we're responding to local needs. It can help create more usable community spaces by finding out how people use and move through spaces and how they want places to feel. It can help us build trust and ownership with communities. When they feel involved in decisions that affect them, this in turn can help increase acceptance and reduces potential opposition to plans. And finally, it encourages the communities to care for their local spaces into the future. We can get the community involved in future maintenance and management to continued legacy and create really sustainable and lasting outcomes. So moving on, we're going to look at some of the challenges and opportunities we experience when co-designing sustainable drainage. So if we start with the challenges, while sustainable drainage is obviously, I'm sure we'll all agree, it's a great thing. It's a response, helps us respond to climate change and flood risk. The realities of implementing this on the ground with communities can be complicated. On the screen there, we've got some common challenges that we may have all faced when trying to implement solutions. So this might be things like car parking concerns, safety issues, the fact it might look untidy, or worries that it might trap litter, that leaf and sap drop might appear on roads. Some people might question whether it makes a difference, and others might question how it's going to be maintained into the future. So co-designing solutions with the local community can help to address some of these concerns from the offset, bringing the community on the journey with you and problem solving together. Those who live and work in the local area will know best how people are going to use the space, and working with them from the start can help reduce issues further down the line. But another major challenge, especially in London, is ensuring that when we're co-designing, that those who are most impacted by the scheme have a say. So we're not just hearing those who shout the loudest. That's why it's important, going back to those early case studies that we looked at, to understand the local social, economic and environmental context through local needs assessments, and ensuring that underrepresented voices are also heard through creative, accessible approaches and through things like partnering with local organisations. So again, we'd love to hear from you on what challenges you may have experienced within local communities whilst implementing sustainable drainage solutions. So a poll should have popped up on the screen similar to last time, and it should create a word cloud. For those of you where it hasn't popped up, just click on the poll button at the top right hand side of your screen. We've got some responses coming through. Lack of interest, lack of trust, sustaining interest, maintenance concerns. Yeah, a lot of the same theme. Loss of parking. Yeah, lots of similar themes coming up. Transient communities, that's a really good one. How do we engage appropriately with transient communities? Lack of understanding, so that awareness raising and education piece is needed. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. As Bridget mentioned earlier, we will, at the end of this, we will email these out to participants so that you can see those kind of common themes coming through. But if we move on to opportunities and how co-design might be able to help us address some of these challenges head on with local communities and those impacted by the schemes. There is a clear difference, as you can see on the screen, between consultation and co-design, and we just thought it'd be worth spending a bit of time clearing this up. So on the left-hand side of the screen, as you can see, consultation usually involves asking the community once decisions have already been made. And this obviously won't give us that opportunity to really address those concerns with the community from the offset, because by the time you've come to consult with the community, decisions have already been made. But as we start to move over to the right-hand side of the screen, the deeper the engagement, the more iterative the process, and the more sustainable and lasting the outcomes are likely to become. So co-design approaches can range from quite a basic level to the full gold standard, as shown kind of between the sections of participation and that sort of co-production and ownership on the screen. So if we start with participation, that's kind of the lightest level of co-design we'd be looking for, and that's just simply involving people in shaping ideas through workshops and focus groups, and this can really help build trust. However, it is still typically very organisation led. So moving across one further to collaboration, this is where we start really designing things together with communities, and that there's a real diverse representation of the community in that process. This is more iterative and often leads to stronger buy-in, but it will take more time. So further over again, we've got partnership approach, which involves sharing power and decisions, and then that ongoing involvement and co-governance. So this process can build even more trust and creates equitable and sustainable outcomes. And finally, on the very right-hand side of the screen there, we've got the gold standard of co-design, which is co-production and co-ownership. So this is community-led from the start, with communities helping define problems and lead solutions. It's inclusive, accessible and equitable, and often involves approaches such as citizen assemblies, and this really delivers long-term impact. So as you can see, there's a full range of how we can incorporate co-design into our projects, and it's not always going to be the gold standard that you need to use, but as long as we're kind of evolving communities in some ways from the start, that's going to help build more trust and help us to address challenges with local communities from the start. So now we've looked at different co-design approaches, I'm going to pass over to Alex Hancock-Tomlin from the National Flood Forum to dive deeper into the lived experience of flooding and how we should weave this into co-design and community action.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Alex Hancock-Tomlin, and I'm a Community Engagement Manager at the National Flood Forum. So to give a quick overview of the National Flood Forum, we're an independent charity with over 20 years experience supporting flooded communities across England and Wales. Some of the key things that we do are helping communities manage flooding impacts and reducing future risks, building partnerships with authorities, communities and stakeholders, and advocating for flooded communities locally, regionally and nationally. So this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about community action, and then we're going to also hear from Fiona, who's going to talk about her lived experiences of flooding. So next slide, please. So whilst it's important to focus upon community action, I just wanted to actually take a quick step back and think more broadly about the immediate and longer term impacts that flooding has. So flooding is complex and multifaceted and can affect people financially, socially, but also their health and well-being. To touch upon a couple of these, financially, even if somebody does have a comprehensive flood insurance policy, there are often hidden costs involved. That may be due to the fact that they've been displaced and then have to spend more time and money commuting and also pay for childcare costs. From a mental health perspective, we also see, I think a recent study by Public Health England found that on average, people are 6 to 7 times more likely to develop PTSD, anxiety or depression who have been flooded in the first 12 months. However, these mental health impacts can often last well beyond that 12 months and even affect people for a lifetime. So looking at this more broadly in terms of, well, what often we see people begin to take actions, and those actions can often be led by trauma and mistrust. So some of the things we see start off with the community is threatening legal action, contacting MPs and councillors, putting them in freedom information requests, putting in complaints, contacting the wrong risk management authority or wrong department, spending a long time on switchboards to different organisations trying to find the right people to speak to, dealing with insurance issues, trying to work out, well, what's covered in my policy? Am I even covered for this at all? And all of this, as I said, can lead to contention due to stress and trauma. So next slide, please. So for the NFF, we have 5 simple principles when working with communities that have flooded. So number 1, that is to support. So we provide practical advice and guidance, as well as emotional and wellbeing support to people that have been flooded. Number 2 is empower. We work with communities to identify causes of flooding, gather information on people and properties in the community, and help them to understand a bit about flood risk. Partnership, improving relationships between communities and flood risk management authorities. The NFF can be there to bridge the gap and act as a conduit between the two. Number 4 is co-create, so enabling collaboration and co-production of flood risk solutions and mitigation measures. And number 5 is self-sufficiency, so working to give communities confidence and tools to continue to find solutions themselves, even without direct NFF support, and manage their own flood risk. So the diagram there on the right shows the different levels that we work at, from an individual level all the way up to a national level. And it's worth touching upon the point that at a national level, we work to campaign on issues such as implementation of Schedule 3 SUDs and better flood insurance. Next slide, please. So I've touched upon flood action groups, which is a large aspect of the work that we do at community level. This slide broadly outlines the steps involved from forming a flood action group, and bear in mind that this can be context specific. What I actually want to do is focus more on some of the challenges that we find when trying to engage with flood action groups across the time. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the key areas that we find particularly difficult is stages 1 and 3. So actually being able to identify and engaging affected residents who are interested and have the capacity to engage. Residents may be fatigued or traumatized and not actually feel ready to go through the process. They may also have mistrust or a fear of advertising their flood risk due to implications for insurance or even landlord evictions. We often find people who are in an unofficial resident status as well. That can also prove difficult to engage with. In these cases, we do try to work with existing community structures or trusted community figure to understand community dynamics and build trust that way. Another area that we often find challenging along this process is number 6, so holding multi-agency meetings. So when bringing together communities and risk management authorities, it is a challenge to ensure that these meetings are productive and that tensions are reduced. The way we overcome this is shown at stage 4, and that is by using a flood action plan to clearly set expectations and outline the vision the community has. We would work through this with the community and devise this together with them, and we would then subsequently share this plan with agencies so that they can become prepared and answer any issues that the community have appropriately. We would never want to spring anything upon risk management authorities. We're there to bridge the gap and work together. We often find issues around stalemates, so the communities may have expectations that aren't realistic. So we work to get together with them to outline what can and can't be done and try and find solutions. And finally, point 9, it's very important to ensure that communities are sustainable and can carry on engaging and don't lose momentum, even when the NFF support drops off. So overcoming this, we try to build networks and relationships and give communities the appropriate dialogue channels that they can carry on engaging with risk management authorities. And it's worth mentioning too that the NFF, even when we do withdraw support or move away, we are still always there for communities. And if they need to reach out to us, we are still always there to support them, provide advice and come back in if needed. And I think that's an important thing to highlight. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this moves on nicely to introduce Fiona, who is going to be the guest speaker for us. And she's going to speak on behalf of Portobello Flood Action Group. And I just want to very quickly outline how they fit in with the work that we've been doing. So the NFF, funded through the Thames RFCC, has been in the last 5 years working on the London Community Flood Action Group programme. This is a 5-year collaborative engagement programme across London, where we've supported 14 communities across 11 different boroughs, each to develop their own community flood action plans and providing a platform and processes for flooded people to address issues on a range of different scales. A big part of this is promoting a non-contentious collaborative approach to engagement, but we are also there to offer a critical friend to risk management authorities and provide constructive feedback when required. So the Portobello Group joined us in 2024. I know they were already established, but they started working with the National Flood Forum. And I think that's a good opportunity to introduce Fiona and let her hear from her about her experiences. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm a management consultant, but for the purposes of today, I'm also the chair of the Portobello Flood Group. So I don't know who all the audience is, but if you're a local authority flood officer, a planner, or somebody who's worried about flooding in their area, I'm here to say to you that I think a flood action group could be your best ally. Now, flood action groups start with neighbours talking, but they thrive when they partner with committed stakeholders. And these stakeholders aren't just councils and water authorities and the Environment Agency. They're also charities, community groups, those much harder to reach bits of the community. Our group began in 2021 after the floods. And some of the visuals you saw in the first presentation were actually taken in our area. And I was walking around the area, literally swapping information with my neighbours about how to get the council to remove sodden furniture and how to contact Thames Water to report flooding because their switchboards were jammed. And I can still remember panicking about evacuating crying children through a window, the hassle of insurance and the worry and expense of rebuilding our basement from scratch. But absolutely nothing prepared me for the horrific stories I heard and the misery I saw. A man with an ulcerated leg who contaminated sepsis because there was no information that it was contaminated water. the Armenian couple escaping through a window with their 5-day-old baby. And as they climbed out of the window, the baby in their arms, a giant floating rubbish paladin, because it's floating because there's so much floodwater, tips over and spews a whole estate's worth of rubbish over them. And an 80-year-old lady barely able to escape up her basement steps as the rainwater outside meets with the sewer outage raising up from her lavatory, sink and bath. And what's truly awful is that some of those people have been flooded before. It wasn't their first rodeo. Anyway, I was lucky. I managed to bump into James, our council flood officer, walking the same route. And he's absolutely terrific. He's supported us in every stage of what we do. And he's helped us to become an NFF group. And all the people we met who said, this has to be a never again event, became our Portobello Flood Group. The NFF and our dedicated engagement officer there really extended our knowledge. They grew our ambitions and they gave us the status to be taken seriously by some stakeholders who would have otherwise not raised us up to that level. Now, our work's in Notting Hill, but there are a lot of misconceptions about it. It's not just the place of the Richard Curtis films, the lovely antique market from Paddington Bear. It's also an area with dense social housing and deprivation. One part of our flood area used to be the 4th most economically deprived area in the EU. Both sides of Notting Hill, rich Notting Hill and poor Notting Hill, exist side by side. And so our group's very diverse. Flooding really hits people hard. But when you're poor, when you don't speak English, when you have additional needs, when you're vulnerable, it can be something that you don't come back to. You just can't get your life together afterwards. And there's a terrible shame that goes with it. And this is something that I can't stress strongly enough. It's about not being able to replace possessions because you haven't got any insurance. It's about living with black mold. So every night you have to crate your kid's school uniform up because otherwise it will smell and get mold. And it's about fearing that if you move out during essential repairs, you won't be allowed to return to your home or you'll be put somewhere worse. So flooding casts a long, long shadow across the community. Even people who are living what you might call much easier lives confess to me that they still cry when heavy rainfall alerts appear on their phones. They're haunted by the idea that somehow they should have prepared better. And some of these people are now uninsurable. They can't get anybody to cover their insurance. So if there's another flood, they're going to be ruined. But as well as this, and this is something that again hasn't been covered in this session, is there's a tremendous silence problem. There are people who don't report flooding or claim insurance because they think it's going to keep their premiums lower, or they think reporting it is going to wreck the future sale or rental of their property. And there are people who don't complain to their landlords because they can't afford a rent rise if repairs are made. Silence really, really matters. It means that you could be left out of a redrawn flood map, so it affects future planning. It means your streets won't get the free sewer resilience measures that they're entitled to. And it stops you building the safer future you could create with your neighbours. So shame, poverty and silence are the enemies of building flood resilient communities. And the good news is that flood groups like ours can fight this in ways that other stakeholders simply can't do because they don't have that community reach. I mean, being realistic, our group can't solve every problem, but we can and do listen to every single story. And people find comfort in speaking to people who've been through it themselves. They learn about available help and how they can get it. And they gain hope every single time we announce a new project. They become committed to helping their neighbours and improving the odds of not being flooded again. So let's look at what we've actually done, which is on the next slide. Lots of this are small things. We've got drain spotters. Yeah, we've got iPhone ninjas who check for blocked gullies and spot where drains overflow when it rains heavily, and they report these to the council. We walk the area and look for places to make more porous surfaces. Can we put planters on that tarmac? Can those tree Can we show our neighbours what a green roof looks like, even if you've got zero gardening skills like me? And we use our own networks to support sessions and projects run by councils and the National Flood Forum and other bodies. We help whether it's an information stall in the market or whether it's giving formal information to the Council Scrutiny Committee. We're funded by Flood Ready London to give away free water butts with planters in them through an organisation called Our Rainwater. These are things that connect directly to downpipes to water the plants on top. They have a reservoir to store and slow the flow of water into the sewers. And so they also reduce clean water waste because some people just use a tap on the side to water their gardens. We featured in a video showing people how easy it was to install and use them, how nice they looked. And more people applied because of this. So my message is that local people really listen to local people. We've got the connections and the credibility to build bridges between organisations and communities. So this time last year, we worked with the National Flood Forum and the council to run a climate cafe in a local venue to break the silence that I talked about earlier about the extent of flooding and unresolved problems. And some of the horrible stories I told you at the beginning came out of that project. We didn't have hundreds of people attending, but the people who did come spread the word. And I'm still speaking to new victims of the 2021 floods through this referral event. And afterwards, we liaised with our MP, council services, even friends who have connections with housing associations to try and get some of these post-flood problems resolved. Our MP now has not only flood resilience, but post-flood problems on his permanent agenda for his liaison with housing associations and social home providers. And it's awful that after so many emails and endless phone calls, some of these people still haven't got a full solution. But we don't give up. We're not here today and gone tomorrow. We live with these people and we try and carry on working with them. But a completely different issue is tackling the planning system. That's sort of a high level problem, which is both a cause and a solution for many flooding issues. Through partnership with two other resident societies, we read every single planning application that goes through the flood zone. We check if it's increasing hard surfacing, and if it does, we ask for a net porosity gain. We look at the flood profile of nearby buildings because the building that's applying might be fine, neighbours either side may not be fine. And we ask for attenuation tanks, we ask for blue-green roofs, we ask for rain cycle planters, or just simple ribbons or drainable surface. We participate in local plan work, so what future policy should look like in council. And we review the council's environmental policy, many of those things. We just keep on and on and on pushing the flood resilience agenda. We want all the planning team and all the councillors to think flood resilience first. What does this mean when we do this? It's a sort of systems thinking approach. But there are also bigger projects to come, which are on the next slide. We always say to people, if flooding is a swimming pool of water, some projects take out teacups, and that's great because if you've got a lot of teacups, pool's going to get emptied. But bigger projects are like taking a barrel to that pool of flood water. And we need to go further and faster as a community. So we're looking at a depaving scheme where we can get hard surfacing removed free of charge. I think if we combine this with really good education about why more absorbent surfaces cut flood risk, then it's a great thing for both the public realm and the private realm. So if there are any potential fundraisers out there or potential fund holders, contact me afterwards because we really want to do this. And we're excited just to have begun a trial of Hydrorock, a highly absorbent natural material, which will be laid under sections of Portobello Road to reduce the rapid discharge of surface water into the sewers. It's also going to slow down that critical headwater of flood water, gathering volume speed as it rushes down Portobello Road to flood the low-lying bits of North Kensington. It's an ambitious project costing several £million of investment in works, equipment and new surfacing. And it's also the result of hundreds of hours of meetings, reports, questions, and the close collaboration that we have with the council and other funding stakeholders. It's serious money for a big scheme, and that builds hope in a flooded community. And also in the pipeline, there's a project to make environmental changes to the network of communal gardens which dot the flood zone. So these are privately owned spaces. Each of these gardens is different in terms of size and gradient and planting and trees. And so they're all going to need bespoke plans. Some will need attenuation tanks, and these will be able to rain cycle rainwater and cut the watering holes. Others are going to have swales, so diverting flows of water into dips and landscaped hollows, but away from homes. And some will even take in possibly water from the road. We've had our preliminary walkabouts and meetings, and now we've got to persuade the individual garden committees who own these spaces to let us do the work once we've raised the funding. So no pressure, as my kids say. I mean, that's a really big community action project. So to wrap this up, I'd like to say that sometimes the scale of this task seems daunting. This is climate week, and we know that intense heat and sudden heavy rainfall aren't things that we can reverse overnight. But other times we're really energized by the challenge. We began as a group saying, we can't let this happen again. And we now know that, yeah, it may happen again. Horrific though it is to say, it might happen again. But if it does, we're going to be here for our neighbours, and at least some of them will escape because of the work that we've done. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. So we are running a little bit close to time. We've only got a few minutes left before we will close out. But before I quickly sum up, let me just thank all of our speakers, Evie, Bridget, Lucy, Alex and Fiona, for some very informative and very engaging presentations. Thank you for doing that. So just to quickly sum up with a few points, I'd like to just sort of draw out 6 points, I think, that you can take away. So London does face an increasing surface water flood risk. Current systems are simply not enough without a step change in resilience. And community co-design is essential. Local knowledge, the lived experience, the technical expertise are all key to shaping solutions together. Engagement works best when it starts early, is transparent, is flexible, and prioritises vulnerable or underrepresented groups. And SUDS and flood resilience schemes can deliver wider benefits, including green streets, safer public spaces, biodiversity and community well-being, and perhaps also address some of these heat challenges which we are currently experiencing. Trust, long-term stewardship and clear governance are as important as the flood infrastructure itself. And then flood action groups and local partnerships can then turn these lived experiences into practical actions to create stronger collaboration with authorities. So there's some takeaways for you. We are going to quickly move to some questions, but we are running out of time. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So if we could just scroll to the next slide, which I think is prompting questions. So in the Q&A, we have 3 questions that have been raised. I'm going to quickly summarize what they are and then ask somebody to respond. So we have one from Becky, which is about, do we have any cost benefit work which would demonstrate cost savings over time? Because actually this is very helpful evidence in enabling sort of co-design approaches to be taken forward. Now, Lucy or maybe Bridget, are you able to answer that, do you think?
Yeah, I've put a couple of answers in the chat just because I know we were kind of close to time. But for this one, it's not something we've been directly involved in, but it was kind of quite a big driver in the Coastwise and wider kind of Coastal Transition Accelerator programme. And I know it's something that they're looking at within these sort of wider innovation programmes. So I think certainly in the coastal space, more evidence and research will be coming forward over the coming years. And there's just been a big funding announcement for the next Coastal Accelerator, Coastal Adaptation Pilot, sorry. And I know that kind of co-design and engagement is going to be a big theme within that. So yeah, I think watch this space, but absolutely agree with you there.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. That's excellent. Now we have another question. I'm going to ask Evie if she's willing to respond to this. It's about river catchment partnerships across London and how they might conflict with the use of catchment partnerships from a surface water context.
Yeah, thanks. I think that was from Ed. So thanks, Ed. That's a really helpful question. We absolutely recognise that London has strong river catchment partnerships in place, and they're similarly to bring together partners and communities around those shared catchment priorities. And there's a lot of experience, trust, and local knowledge there. And we absolutely want to build on that. The surface water catchment partnerships are intended to complement that existing work, not duplicate it, and they share the same catchment-based thinking, but they have a specific focus on surface water flooding. And I hope that distinction is clear in the strategy. As the first surface water catchment partnerships are now established, we are looking for opportunities to collaborate with the existing river catchment partnerships, particularly where there are shared priorities and local knowledge that can link in with these upcoming schemes that are very much in their early stages at the minute. So overall, the intention is very much positive alignment, building on what's already known, learning from established partnerships and working together where there are opportunities to do so. Our inbox is always open for conversations like this, and I can pop that email address in the chat as well. I hope
Lovely. Thank you, Evie. And then there's one final question. Let's just cover it, even though we're 1 minute over time. So this is from Tony, and it's really about, I guess, fatigue. So maybe Alex and Lucy might be able to answer this one. So it's, how do you sustain interest, engagement with communities? Because actually, from design through to implementation could take a considerable amount of time, and people may even flood in that interim period again. So do Alex perhaps or Lucy want to come back on
Sure.
that?
I mean, yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, certainly from the groups that we work with, you're completely right. This is a long process. We have flood action groups that we've worked with for multiple years, and we do find that things can be slow and groups can get frustrated. So it's completely a valid point. What we try and do is try and work with them continuously. There will be times where, it's kind of almost like sort of out of sight, out of mind, right? Flood action groups will go quiet. You won't hear something from a few months, but we will always make sure that we check in with groups, reach out to them to see if there's anything going on. We also try and work closely with lead local flood authorities to ensure that we're kind of more engaged in wider things that are going on in the area. So even if there aren't flood action group meetings being held, we'll still try and check in if there's a community resilience event, or if there's the resilience forum holding something. We'll always try and make sure that we're involved in that. So yeah, it may well be that sort of things go quiet and take a while on the flood side, but we will always try and tie in with wider climate resilience initiatives. Yeah, I hope that might answer some of it.
Thank you, Alex.
Can I just add to that
Lucy?
as well, Steve? Yeah, just
Yep.
I did put an answer in the chat as well, but I think as well as everything that Alex has covered, some quick wins can be really vital for kind of building that trust and momentum. And we had this in a coastal setting at Overstrand, where obviously the time periods are really long when it comes to kind of coastal erosion and implementing solutions there, but getting some quick wins in. I don't know, some of Fiona's examples were really great in her presentation, things like just installing water butts. Is there anything that you can do that's kind of in the meantime, whilst communities are waiting for that longer term scheme?
I think the most
Right.
important thing is that you listen
Excellent.
what communities actually want to do, because you can have a checklist of things that you think are good, but if none of those are things your communities want to engage with, or they're very cynical, it is going to take you a latent period to rebuild that trust. I mean, I'm from Kensington. We're the borough that had Grenfell. You can imagine what the poorer bits of my flood zone think about working with the council. You don't get there overnight. And I think there is a terrible tendency for organisations involved in flooding. They've got a fixed term contract. They want to deliver it within those parameters, which is obviously a commercial thing. But that isn't the way that traumatized, diverse groups work. So I think you have to be led by the community.
Great. Well, look, thank you, everybody. I don't think we have time for any more questions, not that we've got any more in the Q&A. So if we could just move on to the next slide, which I think is just saying, if you've got any other further messages or anything you think that's resonated with you, please do put it in the chat. We can leave that open for a little while after this call. And then if we just move on to the last slide, please. It's a thank you very much for joining this. I hope you found that interesting. We're always happy to have feedback. There's an email address there that you can reach out to the stakeholder engagement team at JBA. Obviously, you can reach out to any of the speakers. So thank you for your time. I hope you're not too hot. Please have a drink and find some lunch or find some time to have a rest. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.